When the women shrank back in fear, Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti grabbed the stick, waved it around, that women now had the power before taking it with her, displaying it prominently in her home.
She was born into affluence, and if you follow the story of her life, she was first, number one, in virtually everything in this country that a woman would do.
She was on a mission.
She was on a mission.
She knew what she wanted.
She knew what she wanted.
She knew she needed to speak to convince people.
To convince people.
And she tested it in Abeokuta.
She tested it in Abeokuta quite successfully.
She was able to rally the women.
She was able to rally, galvanize the women.
The husband was the first chairman of the
Nigerian Union of Teachers.
Are there lessons to take from the relationship between Reverend Ransome-Kuti and his wife Funmilayo?
When the likes of political leaders could not even dare, she traveled, met Chairman Mao of China. If you don't want Funmilayo to go somewhere, tell her that she must go there. It is what you want her not to do that she will do. All her children, of the 4 children, Fela was the most beloved by this woman because they share the same radical bent.
Funmilayo was expelled from the NCNC.
Yes.
Why? The West African pilot called her the Lioness of Lisabi. If you read this book entitled A Short Stroll Along History Avenue, written by Femi Kehinde, the author took time to tell us about her political exploit, her activism. I am particularly interested in these lines. On page 78 of the book, Femi Kehinde writes that the Egba women's refusal to pay abnormal tax combined with enormous protest organized under the guise of picnics and festivals was a guise to beat the security of the British colonizers. The British colonizers teamed up with the local lackeys to subdue the women of Abeokuta. Femi Kehinde in his book says, at one protest, the Oro stick was brought out, a symbolic artifact of the secretive male court of the Ogboni, supposedly imbibed with great power, and the women were instructed to go home before evil spirit overcame them. When the women shrank back in fear, Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti grabbed the stick, waved it around, that women now had the power before taking it with her, displaying it prominently in her home. It is the story of Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti on State Affairs. Honorable Femi Kehinde, it's good to have you again on State Affairs.
Edmond, good afternoon.
You have told a story in this book. And the story of Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti is exciting. She was a woman that was different from the rest. And she made huge impact. While you were researching and writing about her, were you excited to tell the story?
I was really excited because we live in a patriarchal society that subordinates women's voice. When you now see a woman that is bold, that is assertive, that is defiant, that believes in a cause, then you will know that that person is a person of impact And she had really lived an impactful life. For 78 years, she lived an impactful life.
I kept picturing her grabbing that Oro stick, waving it around,
And went home, even with the stick.
And the members of Ogboni court were helpless.
Yeah, they were helpless. And that was how the riot started, the protest started. You see, you cannot look at Funmilayo's story in isolation. You need to look at the circumstance of her birth, her aristocratic background, daughter of a Sierra Leonean returnees, the slave returnees, the Saros in Abeokuta. Daniel Olumeyiwa Thomas and Lucretia Phyllis Omoyeni were the parents. They had tasted Western education. And in 1900, October 25, 1900, when this woman was born, she was born into affluence. And if you follow the story of her life, she was first, number one, in virtually everything in this country that a woman would do. And that is why I call her the doyen of female rights in Nigeria. I call her the numero uno of women activism. And women activism cannot be in isolation. If she had impacted women's lives, of course, she had impacted the entire society.
You even called her the mother of Africa.
And most papers celebrated her. The West African pilots of Nnamdi Azikiwe, which she was a very prominent member, described her as the Lioness of Lisabi. Some newspapers described her as the mother of Africa. She was really the mother of Africa. If you look at her story, how she galvanized women's movements in Nigeria, she used the opportunity of her early education. This was a woman that women education ended in primary schools in those days. She was the first woman, alongside four others, that would attend Abeokuta Grammar School.
A school dominated by men.
Yes, the very first person. And when she left Abeokuta Grammar School in 1914, in 1918, she was there between 1914 and 1918. She traveled immediately to the United Kingdom in 1919, where she studied. And as parts of her studies was elocution, Edmund, elocution, the habit of public speaking. And immediately after graduation, she didn't stay. She came back home to Nigeria, back to Abeokuta, because she had a mission. Right in England, she dubbed her English names, Frances, Abigail, to Funmilayo, her Yoruba name. That was the name she brought back to Nigeria.
She was on a mission.
She was on a mission.
She knew what she wanted.
She knew what she wanted.
She knew she needed to speak to convince people.
To convince people.
And she tested it in Abeokuta.
She tested it in Abeokuta quite successfully.
She was able to rally the women.
She was able to galvanize the women. Following her story, she got back home. She had been in a courtship with Israel Oludotun. that had also gone to Forabe College and was principal of Abeokuta Grammar School. And they continued with this relationship until the 28th of January 1925 when they got married.
We are talking of Ransome-Kuti.
Yeah, Ransome-Kuti.
Fela's daddy.
Fela's daddy.
And we are talking about Fela's mommy.
Fela's mommy. So she had 4 children. You know, I said she got married in 1925.
Mm-hmm.
She had 4 children. Dolupo, the first child, 1926. Olikoye, professor of pediatrics, 1927. Olufela, our own popular Fela Anikulapo Kuti, was then Fela Ransome-Kuti, 1937. And Beye Kolari, the popular Beye Ransome-Kuti, 1940. So she had prepared her life. By 1940, she had all her children. So she now gave her life to full activism, ably supported by the husband, who also, in his own right, was an activist.
The husband was the first chairman of the
Nigerian Union of Teachers.
Are there lessons to take from the relationship between Reverend Ransome-Kuti and his wife, Funmilayo?
The lessons to take was that, biblically, you know, they say that you must be equally yoked when you go into a relationship. I think they were equal yokes. Equal yokes in activism. Israel Oludotun, principal of Abeokuta Grammar School, later principal of Ijebu-Ode Grammar School, was all the while, in fact, started the movement for a union for teachers in this country. As far back as the 1930s, and was part of the commission established by the British government to look for an appropriate site for a university for Nigeria. It was part of the commission that recommended Ibadan for a university. And that was how the University of Ibadan came to be in 1948. Because of this spectacular performance, the Kuti Hall of the University of Ibadan was named after him in 1954. He died in 1955 of prostate cancer. Fela's mother, Funmilayo, was also awarded an honorary doctorate degree of law in 1968 by the University of Ibadan. So you will see that these two souls, who had been boyfriend, girlfriend from their early days, really melted. Israel Oludotun was born in 1891. He was 9 years older than Funmilayo. But they lived a successful life.
You know, you would think in that era, there was a patriarchal society where men dominated.
Yes.
You would think that Reverend Ransome-Kuti would not allow his wife to express herself.
Because the Ransome-Kuti's family, they were natural activists, whether in education, whether in religion, whether in doggedness. It is part of that activism that brought Wole Soyinka, who was a great-grandson of J.J. Ransome-Kuti, Josiah Joseph Ransome-Kuti, the father of Israel Oludotun, the father of Eniola Soyinka's mother's mother. Because that woman died at an early age, Eniola Soyinka had to live with her grandfather, J.J. Ransome-Kuti. So she was bred with the children. And Eniola Soyinka was an activist by excellence.
She backed Funmilayo in her activism.
In her activism. They were both dogged, they were both resilient. That in the Abeokuta Women's Union, they funded it together. She was a trader. And from this threshold, Funmilayo, because, like we said, had taken a part, a visionary part. So she had started, the moment she came back, set up a nursery primary school, set up a literacy class, set up an adult education school, and all sorts of things like that, galvanizing women.
You know, one thing I noticed about her life is that she was not just an activist, she was an organizer.
She was, you see, by virtue of her training, by virtue of her education, by virtue of her company with the Ransome-Kutis and her own parents, she grew up in an organized life. You know, funnily, Abeokuta was quite different from other parts of the Yoruba nation. Because as far back as 1893, the British government had given them a temporary right to govern themselves, which was formally encapsulated in 1898 by the formation of an Egba Federation, Egba Nation, with its own custom, its own police, and all sort of things. And that nation survived until the amalgamation of Nigeria in 1914. So, Abeokuta, by virtue of that unique opportunity and the early arrivals of settlers from Sierra Leone, people, slave captives that had come back, and also nearness to Lagos, the first newspaper, Iwe Iroyin Yoruba, started in Abeokuta.
Established by Henry Townsend.
By the great Henry Townsend. The first church was built there.
The church is still there.
Of there, okay? And when you look at Abeokuta uniquely, and you will see that when opportunity beckoned on the Yoruba nation, they were the first to grab that opportunities. How many presidents have we produced through the Egba nation? Shonekan, Olusegun Obasanjo, and Obafemi Awolowo, the great Obafemi Awolowo's mother, was an Ijeun woman in Abeokuta. And that was why Awolowo had that chieftaincy title of Lisa of Ijeun. And he actually grew up and developed himself in Abeokuta. Awolowo lived a defiant life after the loss of his father at the age of 10.
You know, why we talk about Funmilayo, I'm looking at the Nigerian society of today. Because I see a woman who was quite deliberate when she returned back to the country from the UK.
Yeah.
She opened the literacy center to train the women of Egba to develop their minds, knowing fully well that it's a developed mind that can stand for his or her right.
Yes.
So it was deliberate.
It was deliberate. She lived a purposeful life. And she used Abeokuta as a litmus test of opportunity that will pervade the entire structure of Nigeria. She brought women activism, galvanized women together. Haji Agambu Sawaba in the north came to Abeokuta to learn from her. Margaret Ekpo, the great woman in Calabar. Mary Okala, and so many others.
Even Elizabeth.
Even Elizabeth Adekogbe, who was our political rival, but who believed in the same cause of women activism. The 1953 Conference for Women, National Conference for Women all over Nigeria, was in Abeokuta, organized by Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti. As at 1949, this woman had traveled to the Eastern region to fight for the cause of women in the Eastern region, to fight for the cause of women during the Iva Valley.
The Iva Valley mine massacre in Enugu.
The mines massacre in Enugu. The Mary Onye that was murdered in the Enugu prison. And Mary Okala, when the two minds met in Enugu, she said her life had changed by the visit of Funmilayo. I wonder how she mustered the strength to even do all of this.
You know, reading her story inspires me.
It is an inspiring story.
Let's come back to Abeokuta. They revolted against abnormal tax.
Yes, and sold native authority. They revolted against abnormal tax for women, sold native authority, and asked for representation in the government.
And the men did not listen initially.
And the men did not listen initially. They protested for 7 days. They become an instrument of violence on the entire Egba nation, on the Alake of Abeokuta, Oba Samuel Oladapo Ademola. He thought it was a joke. They harassed them by bringing out oracles and said that whoever sees that oracle will not see the next day. Funmilayo grabbed the stick and now told Oba Ademola that you have been terrorizing us with your pennies and saying that you are our husband. Today we are going to revise the order, and use our vagina in Yoruba to now take over the role of husbands. And when this man, this also literate Oba, you know, Egba was a literate society. As far back as the 1880s, the Alake of Egba land had visited England, the Queen of England. So they didn't believe that it would happen. And then the Alake had the support of the Oyinbos, the colonial officer, who threatened Funmilayo.
Some of them were even beaten up.
Funmilayo grabbed the steering of the Oyinbo man, the deal, and said he would not leave the palace.
This is pure resistance.
Pure resistance. The man squeezed himself out and escaped. He said Funmilayo was a devilish woman. And Funmilayo replied that you were born but not bred. Can you talk to a woman like that? And it was on this resistance that the Alake of Egba, Oba Samuel Oladapo Ademola, was chased out of the palace.
They chased the king out of the palace.
After 7 days revolt.
He abdicated.
He was even abducted. And you see, interestingly, I had opportunity of a living testimony from the late Oba Lamidi Olayiwola Adeyemi, the Alaafin of Oyo, whom I was very close to, or close with.
He was at the palace then?
He was then living with Oba Samuel Oladapo in the palace and was attending Ake Primary School. Because his father had noticed that one day Lamidi Olayiwola will become Alaafin of Oyo. In fact, he had prepared two of his children, Peter Olayiwola, to live with the
Alake?
with the Oba of Ijebu-Igbo,
Okay.
Rimolusi, and then Lamidi Olayiwola. The two of them were Olayiwolas, the same age, the same group, to live at the Ake Palace. And he told me his experience, what they saw within those 7 days. In fact, his schooling was disrupted, and he saw the activism of Funmilayo and wondered how a woman could be this strong, powerful, and defiant.
She was daring.
Bold, assertive, and daring.
She was really a lioness
of Lisabi. And towards the end of 1948, he was sent on exile to Osogbo, the capital of present-day Osun State. And Lamidi Olayiwola was part of his entourage. He followed him to exile.
This was before independence.
This was 1948 to 1950.
We saw women's power.
Women's power.
How come we don't see that kind of power in our age?
Because the society has been corrupted. You know that Funmilayo fought for universal adult suffrage, the right for women to vote in this country. That right did not come into full fruition, even in the northern Nigeria, until about 1979. You know, the 1979 Constitution now said that every citizen of Nigeria from the age of 18 is old enough to vote and be voted for, with some classifications. These were the products of Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti. And when I look at our life, and I look at the present crops, is it because Funmilayo started from Abeokuta Women's Union, it graduated to Nigerian Women's Union, it graduated to Federation of Women's Society and all sorts, with the likes of Elizabeth Adekogbe, with the likes of Oyinkansola Abayomi, with the likes of Alimotu Pelewura in Lagos, the leader of the market women that Abibat Magaji took over from in 1951. She emboldened women struggle. With the likes of Adoni Oluwole, the woman who founded a party called Egbe Koyinbo Mati Ilo, that the Oyinbos should, that Nigerians were not matured enough for independence, that the crop of politicians that would take over would be like a transition from British overlords to Nigerian overlords.
She was right.
She was right. She set up a party and even won a seat in 1954 in Ikirun, in Osun North, to the Western House of Assembly.
Funmilayo got representation for women in Egbaland.
She got, and by extension, Nigeria. And by 1949, because she fought for representation of women in governance, and that there should be nothing like sole native authority, she became one of the 4 members of the representative government from 1949. And from there, she also moved to to the House of Chiefs in Ibadan. Contested several elections, some she will win, some she will lose. And when you look at that struggle, even despite the loss of Israel Oludotun, the husband in 1955, to prostate cancer, she still took up with the struggle. Shortly after the death of the husband, she went on tour of the Eastern Bloc, a woman.
That tour.
During the Cold War.
Let's look at your book. You see, Femi Kehinde is a historian. He writes books on history. He is a lawyer.
First and foremost.
And he was once a member of the House of Representatives from 1999 to 2003.
To the glory of God.
Now, when you read Femi Kehinde's book, you have no option but to fall in love with history. You know, I always commend you.
Thank you very much. For
the work you do. That's why I'm never tired of interviewing you. Because sometimes when I'm interviewing you, I just find myself listening. I say, just let him flow. Now, you see, this book is short stroll along History Avenue. In chapter 6 of this book, entitled Feminism as a Credible Force Against Colonialism and Imperialism, the Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti's story as Pathfinder in Nigeria, is a chapter you should read, not just as a woman, but as a student of the future. You need to understand the past. You should read this book. Well written, detailed analysis of events, people, and time. It's not just about this book. Femi Kehinde, before writing a short stroll along History Avenue, wrote this one, Of Rust and Gold, Snippets of History. This is a classic. I mean, classic. If you opened this one, you see, he autographed this copy for me long ago when this book was published. Can you remember?
Yes, 2016.
Aha. So I still keep it. I hold it dear. Here, you will read the history of Ibadan, a melting point. Samuel Ladoke Akintola in the eyes of history. Here, you wrote a short article, which you now turned into a big book later. You see this? Now, why am I showing you this book? It is the essence of the class. It's a history class, and it's a class of politics and power. In Funmilayo, you can see activism, you can see politics, and you can see power. In Funmilayo, you learn the power of organizing. He also wrote about Funmilayo here in this book. You said how when Obas had to go on exile. So one of the examples he gave in this article when Obas had to go on exile was the exile of the Alake of Egbaland. I also recommend this book to you. This is the one we are reviewing, but this is a powerful book by the same author, Femi Kehinde. Now, let me read from your book. Here, on page 79, during the Cold War and before the independence of Nigeria, Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti traveled widely and angered the Nigerian government, as well as British and American government, by her contact with the Eastern Bloc. This included her travel to the former Soviet Union, Hungary, and China, where she met Mao Zedong. In 1956, her passport was not renewed by the government because it was said that it can be assumed that it is her intention to influence women with communist ideas and policies. She was also refused the US visa because the American government alleged that she was a communist. That was a political journey, wasn't it?
It was a political journey. It was a journey of defiance. And if you see Fela's life, Fela lived a life of defiance. At the time of the Cold War, all those countries, China, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, were regarded as pariah by British and American governments, and by extension, the Nigerian governments. Despite the distance from Nigeria to China, to Russia, Funmilayo traveled. You know, she was part of the NCNC delegation in 1947 that went to champion for the cause of a different constitution for Nigeria. She attended all the constitutional conferences until 1960 that brought in independence in Nigeria.
She was a member of the NCNC.
She was a member of in fact, the only woman member of the executive of the NCNC before she resigned.
A party led by Nnamdi
Azikiwe and Abat Macaulay. And despite that, when the likes of political leaders could not even dare, she traveled, met Chairman Mao of China.
You know, I wish I could see her and ask her, what was the meeting with Mao like?
Meeting Mao, that was almost a pariah, because China was an emerging major bloc.
And she met Mao during the period of the Cultural Revolution.
And she met Mao. She went to Hungary, she went to Poland, she went to Russia to champion the cause of an egalitarian society in Nigeria.
Can we say she had a communist bent?
She not only communist bent, she was a defiant.
You see, her defiance was so encompassing that you would think that she would spend the rest of her life in prison.
Yes, you see, I want to give an example. If you don't want Funmilayo to go somewhere, tell her that she must go there. It is what you want her not to do that she will do.
What a woman.
That she will do. And that was how she traveled during the Cold War. So immediately she came back, her passport was impounded. Her visas were cancelled. And she couldn't travel again until 1960 when Nigeria became independent. But she had made a point. And it was an eye opener for other women, even for men, to now see opportunities of education in Russia, in China, in Poland, in Hungary, in Czechoslovakia. Before, it was only British Western education, Germany and all sorts. So she opened the way like a Pathfinder. And it is this life of defiance that Fela lived.
Even Beko.
Even Beko, and of all her children, of the 4 children, Fela was the most beloved by this woman because they shared the same radical bent. The house in Idio Road that was burnt, that was taken over by the government, was actually built by Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti. It was a 3-story building. It was not Fela's building. On the ground floor was Beko Ransome-Kuti's clinic. And on the 2nd floor, Fela lived, and then on the 3rd floor. And then had, because it was an expansive structure, had the Kula Labito gang, nightclub and, taverns and all sorts of things like that. And he had come out with an album, Zombie, against the military government. Zombie, oh zombie, zombie, oh zombie. So they saw that music as an affront. And that's like he was forming his own Kalakuta Republic within that ambience. And General Theophilus Danjuma, as the chief of army staff, ordered the raid of that structure. And that was how it started in February 1977. That place was raided. And Mama, coincidentally, most beloved, was either on a visit from Abeokuta or was living there. And when they came, they looked for Fela and they wanted to destroy anything that was visible, including human beings. And they saw Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti, 78-year-old woman, the mother of Africa, and picked her and dumped her through the window to the ground floor. That woman did not recover from that incident until she died on the 13th of April, 1978. What a cruel way for such an activist to die. And that was why, a year after her death, Fela came up with a song, Coffin for the Head of State, and took a mock coffin of his mother to Olusegun Obasanjo in Dodan Barracks, a fellow Egba man. And came out with an album. They kill my mama. They kill my mama, 70-80-year-old mama, political mama, influential mama. She was the only mother of Africa who fought for universal adult suffrage. What kind of government be this? And our records were records of activism. Fela was not a praise singer. He looked at the ills of the society. Yellow fever, suffering and smiling. Are we not seeing all those things today?
You've talked about Fela. I knew we were going to talk about him. There's a book I have been reading. It is entitled Afrobeat, Fela and the Imagined Continent. You cannot talk about Fela without talking about his mother.
Of course, she was the precursor of Fela's activism.
This is the book.
Yes, and even Beko, Beko was charged for treason. As a result of the June 12 election, Beko was charged for prison with Bola Ahmed Tinubu, with Comrade Olaoni, and Taiwo Akeju. Those were the four that were charged for treason. They were in custody until Bola Ahmed Tinubu managed to find his way out of the country and thus began a life of exile. So there is no way you would talk about radicalism in Nigeria without talking of Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti, Fela Ransome-Kuti.
You can read this book, written by Professor Shola Oloriyomi, a well-researched book on Fela, Afrobeat, Fela, and the imagined continent. We recommend this book to you. Funmilayo was expelled from the NCNC.
Yes.
Why?
Because she was a member of the Western House of Assembly, House of Chiefs, and now wanted to go to the House of Representatives. She sought for their ticket and was denied that opportunity. And she ran as an independent candidate, campaigned vigorously, that made the NCNC to lose that seat
To the action
to
group.
the action group. So she garnered over 4,600 votes as an independent candidate. The NCNC had about 9,600 votes, and AG won because of that problems in the NCNC with just 10,000 plus votes. So imagine if the votes of Funmilayo and the NCNC had been pulled together, that would have been over 15,000 votes against the AG's 10,000 votes. That was why she left the party. That was how she was expelled from the party, founded her own party, which she called Commoners People's Party. But due to low funding, the party could not survive.
She was a politician.
Par excellence.
I like her.
I love her.
I love her spirit.
I love her spirits of doggedness and resistance.
Brilliant woman. She was a teacher.
She was a teacher. She was a trained teacher. She studied in England, married the principal of Abeokuta Grammar School, who later also became principal of Ijebu Grammar School, lived in an intellectual environment. And if you look at Olikoye Ransome-Kuti's life too, had been a medical doctor since 1958.
Olikoye seemed to be the one that was calm.
Yes,
among the children.
Calm, but also silently bold.
He was Minister of Health.
Do you know how he got that appointment? He had never lobbied for any appointment in his life. Whilst Ibrahim Babangida was the chief of army staff, Ibrahim Babangida was somebody that had known and had prepared himself for the office of president of this country.
Did you say that?
Yes. Whilst as chief of army staff, he was a cosmopolitan army officer. He had friends across the boards. He would go to the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs to listen to lectures. One day, he was there to listen to a lecture delivered by somebody that happened to be Olikoye Ransome-Kuti on child health care. Babangida was so fascinated by his delivery, by that speech, that he had noted in his mind that if he one day becomes the president of this country, this man will be his minister for health. When General Babangida eventually made it, from 1963, the North had prepared an intellectual corps in the army as a future holder of office of government in this country. Makama Bida, that was the Minister for Defense, had scouted from Bida Secondary School for the likes of Mama Vatsa, for the likes of Abdusalami Abubakar, for the likes of Ibrahim Babangida, for the likes of Sani Bello. They were all classmates. They joined the army. Because of them, they reduced the entry qualification from 4 credit practice to 4 ordinary passes, because they wanted to bring up the North, galvanize the North. And that was how even Muhammadu Buhari was also able to join the army. So he had prepared himself. The system had prepared him. The northern politics had prepared him. The British government had prepared them. So Babangida, when he became president, just picked up the phone and called Olikoye's number. Olikoye was married to a white woman. So it was the wife that picked the phone. President Babangida spoke with the woman on the other line, said, "Good afternoon, ma. Can I speak with Professor?" So the woman thought it was one of Becker's usual pranks of calling himself something. He said, "Who is on the line?" He said, "President." When he came, he said he was not going to be head of state.
Yeah.
Don Kabali said that was when they noted that this man was a political army officer. He said, "Call me President." He said, "President Ibrahim Babangida." Said, "Olikoye, come and listen to your brother again, who said he's President Ibrahim Babangida." Olikoye picked up the phone. He said, yes, President Babangida, how are you?" He thought he was speaking with Olikoye Bekolari. And when he saw the voice and the comportment, I was saying, sir, I want you to visit me in Dodan Barracks. I want to run this government with you. I want you to be the Minister for Health. I enjoyed your delivery on so date at the National Institute of International Affairs, where you delivered the lecture on child health care. I still cherish Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida for that effort.
You do?
Yes. Because military governance is an aberration, globally and all over. But it could be benevolent at times. But however benevolent, it will still not take the form of democratic governance. And that was how Olikoye visited Babangida. He said, "I will not go alone. Beko, you have to follow me." And that was how the two of them visited Babangida, and he was military minister for health until 1992, from where he moved to the World Health Organization. And you will see that the central focus of his involvement in that government was child health care, because he was a professor of pediatrics. I think that is how to recruit leaders Obafemi Awolowo did it successfully. He wanted to run free education. The concept of free education was not Obafemi Awolowo's concept. In fact, at the executive meeting of the party, Awolowo was the first to run it down on the strength of finance. Because Awolowo had a background in economics. He had his first degree in economics from home, Bachelor of Commerce. He said, however robust is this plan? Where do we get the funds? S.O. Awokoya, Michael Adekunle Ajasin, Ogedengbe, those are blood divisions, said that we already have a blueprint. You know, Ghana had already had free education under Nkrumah before we started our own. Funmilayo was also equally close to Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. And they explained to Obafemi Awolowo how they would do it, where they would get the funds. He said, what of the structures? How do we build schools? They said, Your Excellency, we are going to build buildings with mud blocks, with brick foundations. Headmont, some of those structures are still alive today. They built crash buildings. How do we recruit teachers? They said, look, we are going to do teacher training education. People from Standard 6 will be recruited to teach. 1 year crash program, teacher training education, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and all sorts of things like that. Those were pragmatic planning. And that was how he made Awokoya from our Ijebu to be the Minister for Education before the dispersal, before the Fela. And at that, all of those periods, Michael Ajasin that attended Fora Bay College, the university in Sierra Leone, was very, very supportive of that policy. Michael had been principal of Imade College, the founding principal of our high school from December 1962. From 1948, the Action Group Party was lodged in Oba Olagbege's palace, So that was our recruitment process in the present political organogram and structures that we operate, and has been very, very faulty.
And we can see the consequences in poor governance, poverty, violence in the country.
Yes. Awolowo saw Philip Umeade. He had invited people from the north to come and be his running mates in 1979. They had a conference in Premier Hotel. Philip Umeade and Ibuman came up with a robust policy on our foreign policies. They had never met him. But after that delivery, Awolowo called him. Said, I have invited this from the north to come and be my running mates. Let us do it together. Philip Umeade, a lawyer. And that was how Umeade became Awolowo's running mate.
On the basis of his intellectual output.
On the basis of his intellectual output. But you now use people now because he's a cousin of Mr. Sobodi. He's somebody's daughter. He's somebody's son. He's somebody's friend. He's this, or you want to maintain a family political lineage. You don't run government like that.
Let's, I want to look at the relationship between Funmilayo's children. It is the story of Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti, an inspiring woman. And this story we are telling is a story that had been put in books. And that is why the guest lecturer of the day is Femi Kehinde. He has written books for us. We are discussing chapter 6 of this book, A Short Stroll Along History Avenue. We are discussing chapter 6 of this book. In chapter 6, the author gave a detailed account of Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti. And he has taken his time to reenact that story through the power of his voice. My guest is also the author of the book of Rust and Gold, Snippets of History, another great book. I think this is the most popular Onudara bookstore. And the reason is the only one we have uploaded on the store. Samuel Ladoke Akintola in the Eyes of History. Remember that interview with him? But now, we are going to upload the other two classics on udarabooks.com soon. You see them? These are the kind of books we should read to prepare for the future. So my guest is loaded with history. Since we are talking about history, it's also important I introduce you to this, do I call it a novella? It is not a novel. But it's a well-packaged book. Some will say pamphlet. It is more than a pamphlet. It's about 35 pages. Published by Evans Publishers. If you read this work, it tells you everything about Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti. These are the kind of books you should buy for your children. It's an easy read. It was written with young persons in mind. I recommend this to you. I've talked about Afrobeat, Fela, and the Imagined Continent, written by Professor Shola Olorunyomi of the University of Ibadan. Since we are talking history, we are talking about Nigerian history. You see, one of the pictures on the front page of this book is the picture of Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti. This book is entitled Nigerian History, from the earliest times to the 20th century. Nigerian history, from the earliest times to the 21st century. A good book of history. You can get this book on udarabooks.com. Yes. Look at this. This is about women. Nigerian women pioneers and icons. It's a book written by Professor Bolanle Awe. It's just about women. And Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti is prominent in this book. Nigerian women pioneers and icons. You see this? A great book. In fact, I have said this is the age of women. We have to reenact the revolutionary character of Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti, especially now that society is facing arrested development. We need women to rise and reshape our society. That is why you must read this book, Nigerian Women Pioneers and Icons. Mr. Femi Kehinde, Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti had 3 prominent sons.
And a daughter.
And a daughter. What was the relationship among the children like?
Fantastic. I said fantastic because you remember it's mentioned that in Idioro, the Kalakuta Republic, Beko Ransome-Kuti had his medical practice on the first floor. And Fela, the senior brother, was also there. And Olikoye, the silent man amongst the trio of the sons, was like a father figure to them. Because Olikoye was born in 1927. Fela was born in 1937. And with this relationship, when Olikoye was going to meet with Babangida, he went with Bekolari. So you will see that they were, and the eldest daughter, the first child, Dolupo, that was mostly unknown, was also an activist par excellence.
Why was she mostly unknown?
Because that was the kind of life she picked for herself. But her daughter, Frances Kuboye, the jazz woman, if you know the jazz club on Awolowo Road in Ikoyi, that was Dolupo's daughter. Frances and her husband founded the jazz club. Frances, apart from being a medical doctor, was an instrumentalist, was a jazz woman. You see, you can see that music percolates in their family. J.J. Ransome-Kuti pioneered Egba music, the Christian liturgy music. Lórí òkè òun pẹ̀tẹ́lẹ̀, ibẹ̀ ni wọ́n bí mi sí. The Egba national anthem, all of those things were the brains of J.J. Ransome-Kuti as far back as the 1920s.
A creative family.
A creative family.
Soyinka is related to that family.
Soyinka was a member of that family. He is alive, he is a member of that family. In fact, that family was a great inspiration to Wole Soyinka. You will see that S.A. Soyinka from Ishara, his father, was not as well known as Eniola of the Ransome-Kuti stock. And if you read Soyinka's book, Ake, the days of his youth in Abeokuta, his father was an headmaster at the St. Peter's Ake, that is Soyinka. And it was this family, the encouragement from the Ransome-Kuti's family, that pervaded the children of Eniola too. You will see that Wole Soyinka's younger brother, Femi Soyinka, was a professor of medicine and all sorts like that.
Even Soyinka's son is a doctor.
And even Soyinka's son is a doctor. Wole Soyinka took his spirit essence, his spirit being, from the Ransome-Kuti's doggedness. And he's still a very, very close member of the Ransome-Kuti family. He was very, very supportive of Fela Ransome-Kuti throughout his travels. And Fela also supported Wole Soyinka throughout his travels from one prison to the other in this country.
You know, in this chapter, you did not only talk about Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti, you talked about other women activists.
Yes.
That have also shaped history in Nigeria.
Yes.
You've mentioned Elizabeth Ade.
Elizabeth Adekogbe.
You've talked about Janet Okala.
Janet Okala from Enugu.
Wurala Eson.
Wurala Eson, the first woman senator from Ibadan.
She was inspired
very
by Funmilayo
inspired.
Ransome-Kuti.
She was inspired. You see, if you look at that piece, Feminism, I use Funmilayo as a pathfinder, and she was a successful pathfinder. Janet Okala in her diary said that Funmilayo's visit to Enugu was a great inspiration that changed their focus about women emancipation. Margaret Ekpo of the Aba Women's Riots. You know, there was the Aba Women's Riot of 1929.
Yes.
And Madam Enwere Yua from Olokotan that ignited the fire when the colonialists wanted to do enumeration in her house, wanted to count the dogs, the fowls, and the goats. And they knew that the essence of that enumeration was increase in tax, and then women would now be asked to pay tax. It had to unknown. And said that was your widowed mother counted, enumerated.
That was what she said to Mark Emerenwa.
That was what she said to Mark, yes. And the woman went to the market town and protest. And from there, women were coming from all over the Igbo nation.
The Aba Women Riot or the Aba Women or the Women War, as you said, came before the women of Egbalad invaded the palace.
Yes, it came before in 1929. But it was a build-up that was exploited by the likes of Janet Okala, taking the inspiration of Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti. When a warder, a female warder, was murdered for refusing the advances of a senior officer, they were encouraged by Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti. They invaded the prison, asked for the corpse of the woman to be exhumed, and then the culprits were sentenced for murder. It was Funmilayo that encouraged Margaret Ekpo on how to galvanize women in Aba. As a result of the scarcity of salts during the Second World War, they used a strategy developed by Funmilayo to mop up all the salts and now gave a condition that it's only those that support their struggle that she will sell salt to. So their husbands had no choice but to release their wives to join the Aba struggle.
Let's read your book. On page 86, you said during their time together, Margaret Ekpo and Ransome-Kuti discussed the need for women's involvement in politics. And together, they went on to tour the southeastern region to encourage women to engage in politics. Ekpo's potent tool at women's mobilization was to encourage more women to join the Aba Women's Market Association so that she could pass on information from the meetings to them. But their husbands were reluctant to allow these. after World War II, salt was difficult to get hold of, and Ekpo used this to her advantage. She bought all the bags of salt, giving her control of its sales, and then ordered that only women who were members of her association could be sold to. As salt was a necessary item, all the men allowed their wives to register. So these women were strategic organizers.
They were organizers. They were mobilizers.
You know,
they were highly strategic. You know, Margaret Ekpo also studied in Dublin. She followed her husband to Dublin and she read domestic science. So,
she was initially from Anambra State.
She was from Anambra State.
But married an Ibibio man.
Married an Ibibio man. Are now resident in Calabar. The husband was a medical doctor, trained, who studied in Dublin.
You know, the power of market women. You know, Wurola Eshon at some point became Iyalode of Ibadan.
Yeah, you see, the power of women, market women, started as far back as the period of Efunroye Tinubu, the great woman mobilizer, slave trader, and first Iyalode of Egbaland, who was born in 1810 and died in 1887. She was a great inspiration to women's power, and that was why the Iyalode, Obasanjo's neighborhood in Abeokuta, was named after her, and the Tinubu Square was named after her in Lagos, because she started from Lagos to Badagry, from Badagry to Abeokuta. She deposed kings in Lagos, installed kings. She was very powerful.
Is the same Tinubu connection we are talking about today? Is she linked to the same Tinubu connection?
No. No connection.
No connection.
Madam Efunroye Tinubu, purely an Egba woman. This our Tinubu has never claimed to be an Egba man. It's not connection. But our life was an inspiration to Alimatu Pelewura that took over the struggle of market women in Lagos. She died in 1951. Alimatu Pelewura mobilized women and used it as a potent tool to fight against women taxation in Lagos, fight against price control in Lagos, and fight against decent market structures in Kereko markets.
But why were these women so defiant against taxation?
And they were defiant. As far back as that time, Alimatu Pelewura had gone to jail several times.
Why didn't they want to pay tax? Even Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti, they fought against tax reform, they fought against price control. Why didn't Aba women was also against tax?
Yeah.
Why didn't women want to pay tax?
Because it was to them a patriarchal society.
That men should be responsible.
That you cannot tax my husband and also tax me.
That was not feminism.
That was not feminism. And that was why Madam Weyeruwa asked the officer, was your widowed mother enumerated? Because the idea of tax, even in Igbo land, for men, did not start until 1928. And aside from all other opportunities for women, they believe that if you want to tax them, they must have representation in government.
No taxation without representation.
No taxation without representation.
It was also what led to the American independence.
It was also what led to the American independence. If you see the Boston Tea affair that started from Massachusetts, that was started by the imposition of tax, which they call the stamp tax by Britain, now enraged the 13 colonies in America to come together and say, we have to fight this. And in 1787, at the conference in Philadelphia, a new nation was erected. And the man who fought the struggle, who fought the war, George Washington, became the first president of the United States of America in April 1789. So, because of this, all the economies met and decided to form a nation. And that is a great departure from what we see in Nigeria. If you enter America, if you go to Philadelphia, the first signpost you will see when you enter the state of Philadelphia, it says, "Welcome to Philadelphia, the first to join the Union." Nigeria was a creation of Sir Lord Frederick Lugard's fancy.
Not the creation of the Nigerian people.
We were the Nigerian people. The southern Nigeria did not come into being until 1900 after the defeat of the great Vorawen Ugbaisi, and was exiled to Calabar with 2 of his wives. The northern region, the northern Nigeria, did not come into being until 1903. But because Lugard, who joined the British government from the mercantile level as Major Lugard, had seen that the resources of America, of Britain, could not be used to fuel the governance in the northern region. And they needed the resources of the South to govern the two entities. And that was how the idea of a Nigeria came into being. And it is so funny, Edmund. When you look at the dispatch of Lord Harcourt on the 26th of December, 1913, he was the secretary of the colony. Lord Harcourt was the name whose Port Harcourt was named after. So Port Harcourt is not an indigenous nation. He said in that dispatch, "May the union be fruitful, and may the parties remain constant." Because he knew that those contending forces, at a point in time, would develop some hiccups. So America, if you look at that yardsticks, you see, some formed the United States of America. The Southern America went on their own. You see, those are mostly slave returnees and all sort of things like that. To find Brazil, Mexico, and all sort of things like that.
Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti has taught us lessons.
Yes.
Lessons from the past.
Yes.
If you were to advise women of today, what would you say to them?
Edmund, I think the women of today should really go back to history and see how women activism, market women societies were used as credible forces to fight colonialism and bring good governance to this country. Do we have such women now? I told you Alimotu Pelewura's almost forgotten story in Lagos. Alimotu Pelewura was succeeded by Abibatu Magaji in 1951. as the market leader, does that trend continue today? Market women are now political market women. At the conference of Nigerian women organized by Funmilayo in 1953, women came from all shades to Abeokuta. Elizabeth Adekogbe had sympathy for the action group. Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti had sympathy for the NCNC. That was why they parted way. But despite those political differences, matters relating to women liberation, women's struggles, they were still together. They were still together. But now, you see government using women as forces just to champion the cause of whoever is in government. That was not the Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti style.
So women need reawakening.
They need to be rejigged.
And that is why they must read about women.
That is why they must read about women. You see, I have a background of women activism through my own mother. And if you read the story of Samuel Ladoke Akintola, my mother was one of the leaders, a young woman, that fought against the Akintola government in Gbongan to protest against the rigging of elections. This woman was arrested and was sent to jail. I was a young boy, and I followed her to the trenches in the villages while she was running from arrest. We were moving from one village to the other until she was eventually arrested. She was clamped in police detention in Nodiomu. She escaped and was now charged to court. And that, I can never match her level of political activism. She fought for the cause of the action group. And this was recognized by Chief Obafemi Awolowo.
We need more women like your mother.
We need one woman like that. And throughout her life, it was a life of defiance for the cause of the deprived in this society.
Femi Kehinde, thank you for coming to the class of history, politics and power again.
Yes, thank you, Edmund.
We'll bring you back again.
Thank you.
I hope you are writing more books.
Our next book, which we call A Supple Dance Around History, will come out in December by the grace of God.
You'll be coming back to the class again to tell us about that book.
It's a bookway of its precursors. It's about 25 chapters, and I'm sure you will enjoy it.
Thank you for writing for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay. Wait for the next class. And thank you for always being there. I am Edmund Opilo.